2020 continues. Is there proof of heaven? Once again, Elizabeth Vargas.
8 million Americans claim to have had a near-death experience, but neurosurgeon Eben Alexander never thought in 1,000 years he would be one of them.
What did you think those were?
Fantasies, hallucinations.
He was a man of science. He didn't believe in it. That is, he says, until it happened to him.
Let's talk about how you got sick. You woke up in the middle of the night feeling ill and in pain.
It was like being struck by a freight train. 4:30 in the morning, woke up. Never had anything like that before. My last words to my wife, don't call 911. You know, trust me, I'm a doctor. It's just a muscle spasm. And I was gone.
Dr. Alexander had a rare and deadly form of bacterial meningitis which was infecting his brain. In a matter of hours, this healthy man was on death's door. By the time they got him to the hospital, he was in a coma.
So your wife was being told that you might die?
And that she would be raising our 2 boys without me.
But as his body lay in that hospital bed with no recognizable brain activity, Dr. Alexander says he had already begun an astounding journey. A journey to a place he'd said didn't exist.
Did you believe in heaven?
When I was younger, I thought a heaven and a loving God made sense, but through my academic neurosurgery career, I saw less and less that could be the case.
The journey began, he says, in a dark, formless place without memory, language, or time. But then
I was rescued from that by this spinning melody of light that came closer and opened up and was a rip in the fabric of reality that just opened up around me.
You described this world as hyper vivid.
The colors were extremely vivid with millions of butterflies. And these flowers blooming, blossoms opening as we flew by.
And by his side, an unknown presence.
There was a person guiding you, a beautiful girl, as you describe her. Tell me what she looked like.
She had a beautiful face with a wide smile and high cheekbones and absolutely gorgeous, clear blue eyes. She never said a word to me. She would look at me and the thoughts would come directly into my mind, into my awareness.
What thoughts?
And the thoughts were, you are loved, you are cherished. There's nothing you can do wrong. I always remember being told, we will teach you many things, but you'll be going back.
Back to the hospital where his wife kept her vigil and his doctors were giving up hope. On the 7th day of his coma, he opened his eyes.
It was just nothing but a miracle.
His first words, the very words he'd heard from his guide, that blue-eyed girl.
All is well. Don't worry, all is well.
Within weeks, Eben Alexander had made an astonishing full recovery.
How are you different after going through this experience?
Well, my family says I'm nicer.
That's a good thing.
Really has changed me in every way by realizing that our souls are eternal.
The book he has written, Proof of Heaven, has sparked a lot of controversy.
You know, you do have skeptics out there who are just saying it's not uncommon for people near death to have all sorts of funky things going on inside their bodies.
Well, that's why the fact that I had meningitis that was so severe, I mean, that should not have allowed for any experience. And then this with the eyes just shows how
his brain was so completely shut down that the visions he had could simply not have been generated there. He says he wrote down everything he remembered, now in his book, before speaking to anyone, so as not to taint his memory.
You then went on to read about other people's near-death experiences. Was it striking how similar what you had written was to what they had experienced?
It was absolutely astonishing.
I really felt the white light was God.
I stopped walking and I saw my grandma.
You could see peace, you could see love.
In all the other afterlife stories, everybody told of being guided by a loved one who had died. You had as your guide a girl you'd never met.
I must say that was very haunting. Why would I go through all that and not have my father there? My father, who was a neurosurgeon, I idolized him, and he had passed over 4 years earlier. Why wasn't he there?
And why the blue-eyed girl instead? Dr. Alexander had been adopted as a child. Years later, he found his birth family, all except for one, his birth sister, who died before he met them.
Her name was Betsy.
How old was she when she died?
She was 36 years old.
So Betsy you'd never met?
I just heard what a beautiful, loving soul she was. How she worked in a rape crisis center and took care of many people who were unfortunate. And she was just a very loving, loving person.
How was it that you came to see a picture of her?
My birth sister, Kathy, had promised to send me a picture of Betsy. And it was about 4 months after my coming out of the hospital when that picture arrived.
He opened the envelope and saw it for the first time. The photo, he says, was of that blue-eyed girl from his vision.
And it was so stunning. And that picture was almost as if she's saying, "Do you get it now?" And I cannot tell you how powerful that was. There was no mistaking it. That's exactly who it was.
Life is back to normal at the Alexander household these days. There are soccer games to watch, dinners to be shared, grace to be said. But Dr. Alexander says he's on a mission now.
I hope to tell my story to everyone I possibly can around this world, because I think it will help this world to be a much better place.
The Divine Principle, Chapter 1, The Principle of Creation. Section 6, The Spiritual World and the Physical World, whose center is human beings. The universe was created after the pattern of a human being, who is in the image of God's dual characteristics. Human beings possess an internal nature, mind, and an external form, body. Corresponding to the human mind and body, the universe consists of the invisible world, the spiritual world, and the visible world, the physical world, both of which are real and substantial. The invisible world is so called because we cannot perceive it through our 5 physical senses. The 2 worlds together form the cosmos. The spirit world is in the position of subject partner, and the physical world object partner. The latter is like a shadow of the former. When we shed our physical bodies, we enter the spirit world as spirits and live there for eternity. The physical self consists of dual characteristics: the physical mind, the subject partner, and the physical body, the object partner. The physical mind directs the physical body to maintain the functions necessary for its survival, protection, and reproduction. For the physical self to grow in good health, it must absorb air and sunlight, which are intangible yang types of nourishment, and eat food and drink water, which are tangible yin types of nourishment. Good or evil in the conduct of the physical self is the main determinant of whether the spirit self becomes good or evil. This is because the physical self provides a certain element, which we call the vitality element, to the spirit self. Our spirit self is a substantial yet invisible reality, which can be apprehended only through the spiritual senses. It is a subject partner to our physical self. our spirit can communicate directly with God and is meant to govern the spiritual world, including the angels. In appearance, our spirit self matches our physical self. After we shed the physical self, we enter the spirit world and live there for eternity. The reason we desire an eternal life is because our innermost self is the spirit self, which has an eternal nature. Our spirit self consists of the dual characteristics of the spirit mind, the subject partner, and the spirit body, the object partner. The spirit mind is the center of the spirit self, and it is where God dwells. The spirit grows through give and take action between two types of nourishment. Life elements from God, which are yang type, and the vitality elements from the physical self, which are yin type. The life elements come to the spirit man. This is God's love and God's truth. Then from the physical person comes the vitality elements, which are based upon good motivation and good actions. The spirit self also returns an element to the physical self, which we call the living spirit element. In summary, the physical life is sustained by the light and air and the food and water we receive in the physical world. And when a person does good actions with good motivation, this provides good vitality elements to our spirit. In addition, from God, our spirit receives life elements, God's love and truth. And when this takes place and the spirit is able to grow, the spirit gives living spirit elements back to the physical life. Therefore, vitality elements combined with God's spirit and truth, and giving the living spirit elements, we receive inspiration and good health in this life. The spirit can only grow while it abides in the flesh. Thus, the relationship between the physical self and the spirit self is similar to that between a tree and its fruit. The fruit of a tree is only able to develop when it is attached to the tree. Only then can it grow through the growing period to become mature and ripe. Likewise, the spirit self can attain perfection only during a person's earthly life. The growth of the spirit self toward perfection progresses through the three orderly stages ordained by the principle of creation. A spirit in the formation stage of life is called a form spirit. In the growth stage of life, a life spirit. And in the completion stage of life, a divine spirit. The form spirit is when a person learns to trust and receive. A life spirit is a person who is learning to care and share with others. And a divine spirit is a person who learns to give sacrificially. A person fully matures as a divine spirit when the spirit self and the physical self unite through perfect give and take action centered on God and form the four-position foundation. A divine spirit can accurately feel and perceive every reality in the spirit world. All the sensibilities of the spirit self are cultivated through the reciprocal relationship with the physical self during earthly life. In the earthly life, we are able to cultivate our heart and mind. Therefore, only when a person reaches perfection and is totally immersed in the love of God while on earth can he or she fully delight in the love of God as a spirit after death. Sinful conduct aggravates evil and ugliness in the spirit of a fallen person, while the redemption of sins granted during earthly life opens the way for the spirit to become good. Matthew 16:19. Whatever you bind on earth will be bound in heaven. It is not God who decides whether a person's spirit enters heaven or hell upon his death. It is decided by the Spirit himself. The content you have just watched is a brief introduction to an important topic, the human spirit and life after death. Understanding this content is crucial if we want to be truly happy in the long term. One way to look at our eternal spiritual life is as our third home. Our first home was in our mother's womb. During that period, we received nourishment and our organs were able to develop. That prepared us for our birth into our second home, this world in which we are now living. Imagine what would have happened to you if in your mother's womb your lungs and stomach did not develop, or if your brain did not receive enough oxygen. Your life here in your second home would have been severely crippled. Our third and final home is a spiritual world. We are born into that world when our physical body dies. And just as our life in the womb was crucial, so also our present life. It is the womb in which we prepare ourselves for our long-term life and happiness in the spiritual world. Therefore, our goal in this life must not be limited to a daily pursuit of happiness. We must also seek after those experiences, even though they may be challenging and sometimes difficult, that will guarantee the long-term growth of our character and of our hearts. In order to achieve that goal, we need to possess a clear understanding of what life is really all about. As was mentioned, truth is a necessary element for our spiritual life and growth.